Chapter 14. Throkeley Mine. They stood for perhaps a minute. Harry had definitely gone. Ron then rushed forward, flung himself on his hands and knees and crawled to the point where Harry had vanished. Nothing happened to him. He slowly backed out and stood up. He looked at Draco. Draco shook his head. "I've no idea," Draco said in a hoarse whisper. "Some say these burial sites are gateways to the other world of folklore," Ambrose said. "I know," said Ron. "We heard all about that when we were here last time. You don't think there's anything in that, do you?" "It's just folklore," Draco assured him. "But if Harry is the great enemy, then he's either been killed or captured," Ron concluded. "If he were dead, why remove his body?" asked Ambrose. "Granville would surely want us to be certain he was dead, to throw us into despair and confusion." "So he's not dead?" Lydia sounded hopeful. She looked pale, and her long hair was bedraggled with the rain. The charm Harry had cast to keep them dry had faded away to nothing. "Captured would be more use," Ron agreed. "Granville could find out how much we know, and Harry would be a useful hostage if we posed any sort of threat to him." The others nodded their agreement. "We need to get back," Ron decided. "To Hogwarts?" Draco asked. "To the Ministry, I thought." "No," Lydia said. They all looked at her, amazed. "Neither," she continued. "We need to get to the centre." "Which centre?" Ron asked. "The centre of the circle," Ambrose nodded. "She is right. That is where the power is. That is where Granville will be. Hopefully, that is where Harry will be being held." "Can you do the map thing again?" Lydia asked Draco. "Not here in this soaking wet field," Draco protested. "I've got the port key, back to Seamus and Demelza's. I'll send them a Patronus message to warn them we're coming." Ron drew his wand. "Sandwich, anyone?" Ambrose suggested, holding up the canvas bag. The others glowered at him. "We need to keep our strength up," he murmured. Ron sent a message to Seamus, his wand tip glowing with that silvery white light, while he muttered under his breath. They gathered around as Ron fished the blue can out of his pocket and held it out to them all. Ambrose tucked the last corner of a sandwich into his mouth and reached out to touch the port key with the rest of them. At Seamus and Demelza's, Ron explained the situation, never mentioning that they had considered Harry might be dead. Draco asked if they had a globe or atlas. Demelza delved in a drawer crammed with random items and pulled out an old road map of the British Isles. "That will do," Draco confirmed. "I think I can bend it into the right shape again." They moved into the dining room, which Demelza recommended as having the most space. It was larger and less cluttered than the kitchen. Seamus moved 2 brooms off the table, telling them he had been servicing them in preparation for a Quidditch match with their local amateur team. Once again, Draco produced the map of light, put stars at the known points, and drew in the circle. Being almost edge-on to them, the curvature was clear. He drew another circle over the existing one. Then he shrank it down, keeping it concentric with the original, until it homed in on the centre and became a dot. "Where's that?" Lydia asked. Draco expanded the diaphanous map so that they could see more detail. "Throkeley," Ambrose read off the map. "I believe I may have been there. I often used to visit the South Lakes, Cartmel, Grange-over Sands, and would stray as far as the Vale of Eden, or even the Dales." "Do you know what's in Throkeley?" Ron asked. "Any of your Neolithic thingies?" "I recall an equestrian centre, several farms, a church, a public house, and a retired mine." "A mine?" said Lydia. "Of course." "What's your thinking?" Ambrose inquired. "Draco, could you show us the whole circle from the edge, please?" Lydia asked. Draco did so. "You see," Lydia hissed, "the centre on the surface is higher than the circle because it's domed." "So the true centre of the circle would be underground?" Draco said tentatively. "And if you wanted to be as close as you could to the centre of the power," Lydia explained, You'd need to be as deep as possible. So how deep is the proper centre? Ron asked. Looking at the scale, I would estimate about 15 miles, Ambrose calculated. Deeper than anyone has ever mined, I should imagine. Deeper than Muggle mines, Lydia corrected. And going underground at all is getting you closer to the centre, Ron said. It seems to be the best lead we have, Draco concluded. We should at least investigate. That, said Ambrose, shaking his head, will never catch on. They had taken the next ferry that afternoon back to Holyhead. Ron had sent Ginny a message that Harry had gone ahead to investigate, and that the rest of them were following. Lydia doubted the wisdom of trying to deceive Ginny. Ambrose doubted Ron's sanity. They had then had to use a side-along apparition twice to get to Throckley. It was the first time for the Muggles. Not even Lydia had managed to find anything entertaining or fun about the feeling of being squeezed almost to the point of suffocation. They had travelled first to Shropshire. Lydia had looked as though she was going to be sick, so they had sat in the sunshine for a while and admired the scenery from Longmynd, until Lydia felt well enough to continue. The second apparition took them to a lane leading into Throckley village. "Are you all right, Lydia?" Draco asked. They had disapparated together, and Ron had taken Ambrose. "At least it wasn't any worse than the first time," Lydia grimaced. "Look, Draco," Ron said. "If you want to get back to Hogwarts, you could take Ambrose and Lydia. I'll be fine from here." All three of them protested. "You need backup, surely?" Ambrose queried. "Can you summon a few more auras to assist?" Kingsley was clear about involving as few people in the details as possible, Ron replied. "Then you need my expertise and my wand," Draco pronounced. "Anyway, I might get a chance to save Potter's life. That would annoy him so much." Ron couldn't help smiling. "And you need me to tell you if you're being stupid," Lydia commanded. "And I will accompany you also," Ambrose observed. "Bloody hell!" Ron exclaimed. "Come on, then." They walked down the lane towards the church tower. They passed the stables of the equestrian centre on their right, and, passing the end of a row of trees, they saw the winding gear of the mine. When they reached the mine itself, it was surrounded by a high chain-link fence. The front gate was heavily chained and sported two formidable padlocks. Ron drew his wand. "Wait," Draco warned. "Let me check that there's no old magic." He took out his glass. Ron was clearly fretting and keen to be through the gates and onward. "Well?" he demanded. "Sorry, yes, the gate is fine," Draco confirmed. "But there's a lot—" "Confringo!" said Ron. The padlocks disappeared in a flash of orange light. Pieces of the chains and the gates themselves were blasted inwards and scattered across the yard beyond. "Subtle. Nice to keep the element of—" Draco began. Ron silenced him with a scowl. "Which way?" he snarled at Draco. Draco pointed past the nearest brick office building. Ron strode forwards. The others looked at each other, then followed. Beyond the offices were a couple of square bunkers, which looked like storerooms. Across a roadway was a long, low building with frosted windows, behind which stood the winding gear tower. "A shower block?" Ambrose suggested. "The cages should be close behind." "Cages?" asked Ron, turning towards them but still striding backwards. "It is, I believe, the term used for the lifts which take the miners underground," he elucidated. Ron turned and strode onwards. "Whoa!" Draco exclaimed as they turned a corner. "Lots of magic here." "What sort of magic?" Ron demanded. "I don't bloody know, Weasley. Old magic," came the retort. "Granger Weasley to you, ferret boy." "Weasel King, you mean?" "Gentlemen," Ambrose intervened, "this is not helping. Let us think for a moment." It felt like there had been a collective slow release of breath, though none of them had actually sighed. "If he's kidnapped Harry," came Lydia's small voice after a short pause, "he's going to want to keep people out, isn't he?" Ron nodded. Doesn't look like that, Draco said. The tendril things are forming a sort of whirlpool around that doorway ahead of us. As though it wants to pull us in? Ambrose asked. That's how it looks. It's a trap, said Lydia. Possibly, said Draco. But he doesn't know we can see old magic. If he assumes we can't detect it, then it may just be how a doorway is. No, the brat is right, came a harsh voice. It's a trap, and you walked right into it. Unseen, 2 hooded figures had appeared behind them. One hooded man stepped forward, holding his wand in front of him. He took Ron and Draco's wands and threw them onto the weed-strewn path at the side of the roadway. Go on, get in, the lot of you, said the same voice. Through the door. And give me that bloody glass, Malfoy, the other voice commanded. As they stepped through the door, they felt a swooping sensation and saw strange green light that suggested some kind of magical transportation, but nothing they were used to using. As the light cleared, they found themselves in a huge room under a domed roof. The light was subdued, the walls a terracotta red, the floor a smooth sea blue, and the domed ceiling a golden ochre, glowing such that it suffused the room with a warm light. A hint of sulphur pervaded the air. Standing before them, beside a marble-topped table, was a thin young man dressed in black robes. Around his neck was a golden chain. As they became more accustomed to the light, they could see his face was waxy and drawn. His eyes were dark-rimmed and hollow. Ambrose Ward, Uncle Ambrose. His voice was thin and rasping. Not so clever after all, are you? I've made you run around after my clues. Yeah, it was all a game, he laughed. We made you go nosing around for the diary. Told you how to find Potter and get him running around too. We even got you into the ministry. I did that. I made the magic that would hide you from the anti-muggle charms, and made the magic that hid it in the diary. Where's... Ron began, but casting about the room, he answered the question he was forming. Lydia followed his gaze and let out a horrified squeak. Somewhere across the room to their right was something they had first taken to be a huge glowing egg. It was taller than any of them, almost as tall as Hagrid. It glowed silver and red. Its surface was a network of silver veins, like the veins of a leaf. Up and down the veins, bright sparks of red light crawled, but the surface was translucent. Suspended inside, they could see the form of a man, spinning in slow motion, as if captured in a moment falling through the air. The man was Harry. Sacrifice, said Granville. Human sacrifice in particular. Fundamentally important ingredient of all magic. That's what you've all been running around for, to bring me Harry Potter. And now he's going to die, so that we can make more wizards and take over their muggle world. What are you doing, Granville? Ambrose asked softly. You have done remarkably well to have worked out all this magical malarkey. I read your journal. I was dreadfully impressed. Your father never thought you were particularly clever. But I recall when you used to invent board games for your own amusement. Do you remember? You showed me them. We played 2 of them, and we enjoyed them immensely. You have a good mind, Granville. It simply needed to be focused. You could be wonderfully single-minded when something took your interest. This, Granville. Why on earth would you wish to do this? Granville coughed a few times. It was a weak, dry cough. What I've done is amazing, he announced with pride. Have done, you notice. I've done magic that nobody has done for thousands of years. I have put the power of magical transformation into this amulet. Even without Potter's sacrifice, I can make a token to turn anyone we want into a wizard, as many times as we want. He held up the gold chain. On it was what appeared to be a brooch, an amber stone mounted in a cheap, frilly, silver-coloured surround. If not for the circumstances, it might have been laughable to call this a magic amulet. Ambrose smiled. It was not a smile of mirth. His smile was warm and poignant. I well recall your mother wearing that when you were a youngster. Obviously before she died, Granville whispered. It hit your father exceptionally hard, Ambrose intoned in a gentle voice. He blamed me! Granville's voice was angry, but the exclamation made him cough again. He wanted her back. He blamed everyone and everything for his loss. What about my loss? Granville's voice was less strident and weaker. Could not see that, because his own loss clouded everything. He was not such a bad man, simply a broken man. Granville looked sullen and defiant. His face was so pale it was almost translucent. His eyes were rimmed with red. He shuffled around the marble table, running his fingertips over the ornate casting of the gilded legs on which it stood. He stopped with his back to the table, leaning against it. Now his fingers caressed the amulet on its chain, still hanging around his neck. His head was bowed. What will you do with your amulet, Granville? Ambrose changed tack. Granville said nothing for a few moments, but then, gathering his strength, he raised his head to reply. It will be the centre of the greatest ritual. Ritual upon ritual. I can turn muggles into wizards. I've already proved it on myself. This amulet will make another token that we can use any time we like to make more wizards. He pulled out a wand and waved it in a circle around his head. A ring of blue flame surrounded them all, including the egg-shaped cage. Granville laughed, though the sound was thin and feverish. See, I can do magic now. You don't appear to be thriving on it, Granville, Ambrose noted. After Effects. Once Potter's sacrifice is complete. Actually, came a drawling voice from behind them. Potter isn't the sacrifice. You are.